In the shadows of ordinary lives lie extraordinary deceptions. This is the story of a man who thought himself clever enough to orchestrate the perfect disappearing act, only to discover that some foundations cannot be dismantled in silence. The laughs we share often echo back to us in unexpected ways. The autumn rain pelted against the kitchen window like tiny accusations as I poured my second cup of coffee, my hands steady with the practiced confidence of a man who believed himself in complete control. 20 years in pharmaceutical sales had given me a poker face that never flinched, even when delivering life-altering news. The weight of the signed papers in my briefcase felt satisfying. Tangible evidence that everything was proceeding according to plan. I sold our house, I announced to my wife Elaine, watching her over the rim of my coffee mug, a strange thrill coursing through me at finally saying the words aloud. The fear of her reaction mingled with exhilaration, creating an intoxicating cocktail of emotions I'd been anticipating for months. Elaine froze, the surgical precision she'd honed in her nursing career suddenly deserting her as coffee sloshed dangerously close to the rim of her mug. "You did what?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, her face draining of color in a way that satisfied something dark and wounded inside me. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment like a fine wine, letting the power of what I'd done settle between us. "I sold the house, Elaine. Papers are signed. Closing's next week." I took another bite of my bagel, deliberately casual, feeling cream cheese catch in the corner of my mouth but not bothering to wipe it away. The small imperfections somehow made the moment more real, more raw. Our kitchen, the one she'd obsessed over with its hand-painted cabinets and that ridiculous tile backslash she'd installed while I was away, suddenly seemed like a stage set I was finally ready to abandon. The oak table where we'd celebrated birthdays, helped Emily with science projects, and weathered countless silent breakfasts now stood between us like the barrier it had always been. "This is a joke," she said, her eyes searching my face with a desperate intensity that made me want to laugh and scream simultaneously. The trust still lingering in her gaze was both pathetic and infuriating. How could she still not see me after all these years? I laughed then, a sound that surprised even me with its hollowness, echoing off the subway tiles she'd spent a small fortune on. Something flashed across her face, pain, betrayal, confusion, and I drank it in, storing it away like fuel for the journey ahead. "No joke. Got almost 800,000. The market's hot." I scrolled through my phone, pretending to be disinterested in her reaction while actually cataloging every subtle shift in her expression. "We can rent something smaller. Your mother's medical bills are killing us. This makes financial sense." The lie rolled off my tongue with practiced ease, wrapped in just enough truth to be plausible. I watched her eyes harden as I mentioned her mother's bills, just as I knew they would. That particular button had been reliable for years. Her guilt over her mother's care was my most effective tool for deflecting questions about our finances. "Marcus, you can't sell a house without the co-owner's signature. My name is on the deed too." Her voice had taken on that self-righteous tone I'd grown to hate, the one that reminded me of all the ways she thought herself superior. Her degrees hanging in the office, her essential work saving lives while I just sold things. The secret pulsed inside me like a living thing, eager to be revealed. I finally looked up from my phone, allowing myself a smile that felt like baring teeth. "Actually, I can. Remember when you were rushing to catch that flight to see your sister last year? You signed a power of attorney so I could handle the refinance while you were gone." The memory of that day sent a thrill of dark satisfaction through me. How easy it had been to slip those extra pages into the stack. How trusting she'd been as she scrawled her signature while distracted by packing. The perfect metaphor for our marriage. Her, always rushing somewhere important. Me, always planning 3 steps ahead. That was for the refinance, not to sell our home. The edge in her voice was new, sharp, and dangerous. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if I'd underestimated her. General power of attorney, Elaine. Should have read the fine print. I stood up, brushing imaginary crumbs from my navy blue sweater, the one she'd given me last Christmas, in especially satisfying detail. Look, I've got a meeting. We'll talk more tonight. The buyers want to do a final walkthrough tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word came out as barely a whisper, and I felt a surge of triumph at her shock. The carefully constructed timeline was unfolding perfectly. They're eager. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, that ridiculous hand-carved wooden plaque that Emily had made in 7th grade. Sentiment had never been my weakness, but I'd learned to mimic it convincingly. Oh, and start packing the non-essentials. We need to be out by the 28th. I closed the door behind me with deliberate gentleness, resisting the urge to slam it in a final act of rebellion. Control was everything now. The game required finesse. In my car, the sensible sedan that had been part of my careful disguise as devoted husband and father, I allowed myself a genuine smile. Phase 1 was complete. Elaine knew about the house sale but not the rest. Not about Christine. Not about the offshore account. Not about my imminent disappearance. My phone buzzed with a text from Christine. All set for today? I replied quickly, on schedule. She knows about the house. Nothing else. Christine's response came seconds later. Can't wait for this to be over. Have the bank documents been signed? A flicker of unease disrupted my satisfaction. The wire transfer instructions had been submitted yesterday, but I hadn't received confirmation yet. Everything hinged on that money moving offshore without complications. Working on final details. I texted back, not wanting to admit there might be a hiccup. I drove to the coffee shop where I'd been working for months. My cover for meetings with Christine and the various professionals who had helped arrange my exit strategy. The baristas knew me by name, thought I was writing a book on medical ethics. A perfect explanation for my extended stays and private conversations. Another carefully constructed lie in an architecture of deception I'd been building for nearly 2 years. The weight of what I was doing settled over me as I ordered my usual American. 18 years of marriage. A daughter in college. A life that looked enviable from the outside. All of it sacrificed for freedom and a fresh start. The momentary doubt felt like vertigo. Disorienting but oddly thrilling. My phone rang, displaying First Colonial Bank. Heart suddenly pounding. I answered with my professional voice. Mr. Reynolds? This is Thomas Kirkland from First Colonial Bank. I'm calling about the wire transfer instructions we received for your home sale proceeds. The careful neutrality in his tone sent warning signals flaring through my mind. Yes, what about them? I kept my voice even, though my fingers tightened around the phone. We have some concerns about the destination account. Our fraud prevention protocols have flagged this transaction for review. Would it be possible for you to come into the branch to discuss this matter? Panic clawed at my throat, but 18 years in sales had taught me how to hide any reaction. I'm in meetings all day. Is there a problem with the paperwork? It's bank policy to verify international transfers of this size in person, especially when they're not typical of a client's previous banking patterns. Your wife is also listed on the house deed. Perhaps she could come in if you're unavailable. The casual mention of Elaine sent ice through my veins. My wife doesn't handle our finances. I'll try to stop by later this afternoon, but this transfer needs to proceed immediately. The closing is scheduled for the 28th. I understand the timing concern, Mr. Reynolds, but we can't process this without proper verification. I'll be in the office until 5 today. After hanging up, I sat motionless, my coffee cooling untouched. This was an unforeseen complication, but not insurmountable. Banks had procedures, but so did I. If necessary, I could modify the wire instructions to route through a domestic account first. It would add steps in time, but the end result would be the same. I called Christine. We have a minor issue, I said when she answered, keeping my voice low despite the coffee shop's ambient noise. The bank wants to verify the transfer in person. What does that mean for the timeline? The edge in her voice was new, a reminder that Christine had her own agenda in this arrangement. Nothing changes. Just a procedural hurdle. I infused my voice with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. I'm going to the bank this afternoon. And Elaine? How did she take the news? I recalled my wife's face as the realization dawned, the color draining from her cheeks, the trembling hands. For an instant, an unexpected pang of something like regret flickered through me, quickly suppressed. Exactly as expected. Shocked, then immediately concerned about practical matters. Always the pragmatist are Elaine. The casual are slipped out unconsciously, and I heard Christine's slight intake of breath. She won't be our anything after next week, she reminded me, her voice hardening. Just make sure the money transfers, Marcus. Everything depends on that. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and reviewed the documents that outlined our new life, the lease agreement for a beachfront apartment in Grand Cayman, information on establishing residency, my timeline for the final escape. Each detail had been meticulously planned, every contingency accounted for. Except, perhaps, for an overly cautious bank compliance officer. I tried calling Elaine, suddenly concerned about her next moves. She didn't answer. This was unusual. Elaine always answered my calls, a small control I'd established years ago by reacting poorly when she didn't. My unease growing, I texted her, "Where are you?" Came home early to talk about the bank situation. Getting worried. No immediate response. This too was out of character. Had I underestimated her reaction? Was she already talking to someone? A lawyer? The bank? The police? No, I reassured myself. Elaine was predictable. She would be at her mother's facility, seeking comfort in routine and obligation as she always did in times of stress. Or perhaps at the hospital, losing herself in work. She hadn't missed a shift in 3 years, a fact she mentioned frequently as if it were some badge of moral superiority. I decided to head home and prepare for what would likely be a difficult evening. The bank situation needed resolution, and I couldn't afford to have Elaine asking too many questions before everything was finalized. But first, I called Christine again. "Come to the house," I said without preamble. "Elaine's not home. We need to make sure everything's ready." "Are you sure that's wise?" Christine's voice held cautious excitement. She'd never been to our home. I'd kept these worlds deliberately separate. "She's probably at her mother's facility. She'll text before coming home. She always does." Another pattern I'd relied on, another aspect of Elaine's predictability that had enabled my planning. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Christine agreed, and I heard the thrill in her voice at the riskiness of it. As I drove home, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension churned in my stomach. Everything was in motion now. 7 more days and I would be on a plane to a new life, leaving behind the suffocating responsibility of being Marcus Reynolds. Dedicated husband, supportive father, respectable professional. The masks I'd worn for so long they'd nearly grafted to my skin. Christine's sleek BMW was already in the driveway when I arrived. The sight of it, so obviously not belonging in this suburban setting, sent an unexpected shiver of unease through me. Too visible, too conspicuous. But it was too late for such concerns now. She was waiting on the porch, blonde hair gleaming in the afternoon light, wearing the expensive watch I'd bought her from an account Elaine knew nothing about. At 32, Christine was everything Elaine was not. Ambitious, unsentimental, focused on the future rather than the past. We'd met at a pharmaceutical conference in Chicago 18 months ago, and I'd recognized immediately a kindred spirit. Someone else playing a role while harboring secret desires for escape. "So this is the famous house," she said as I unlocked the door, her voice laced with barely concealed disdain for the life I was leaving behind. "For 1 more week," I replied, feeling strangely defensive as she stepped into the entryway, her critical gaze taking in the family photos, the comfortable but unremarkable furniture, the accumulated evidence of a life soon to be abandoned. "Are you sure she won't be home?" Christine asked, following me into the house. Positive, I assured her, projecting more confidence than I felt. She's working a double shift at the hospital. We have the place to ourselves. Christine laughed, a light, careless sound that seemed to bounce off the walls of my carefully constructed life. Show me your office. I want to see where the magic happens. I led her down the hallway past Emily's old room, now a guest bedroom, though we rarely had guests, past the master bedroom where Elaine and I had slept in increasing distance from each other for years, to my office at the rear of the house. This is where you work? She asked, looking around at the modest space with its practical desk and filing cabinets. It's so suburban. Not for much longer, I replied, pulling her close, intoxicated by the danger of having her here in my home. The wire transfer hit a snag, but it'll clear by tomorrow. Then we're free. What about your wife? Has she figured anything out yet? I thought of Elaine's face that morning, the shock and confusion giving way to something harder. For a moment, doubt crept in. I'd built my plan around her predictability, her trusting nature. What if I'd miscalculated? Elaine? No. She's completely in the dark. By the time she realizes what's happened, we'll be drinking rum punch on 7 Mile Beach. Christine laughed again and pressed against me, her lips finding mine in a kiss that tasted of excitement and conspiracy. The thrill of having her here, in this space that represented everything I was escaping, was dizzying. Where's the passport? She asked when we separated. And the tickets? We should double-check everything. In my go bag in the car. I don't keep anything important here anymore. Too risky. I led her towards the master bedroom, drawn by the transgression thrill of bringing my future into the space I'd shared with my past. Yet as we passed through the hallway, I could have sworn I heard a faint sound from my office behind us. A soft thud, perhaps, or the whisper of movement. I paused, listening intently, but heard nothing more. Just nerves, I told myself. The high-stakes game I was playing was bound to fray even the steadiest composure. With Christine's hand in mine, I continued down the hall, pushing aside the momentary unease. In the bedroom, Christine explored openly, running her hands over Elaine's vanity, peering into the walk-in closet with its neatly organized rows of sensible clothes. She doesn't suspect anything? Christine asked again, examining a framed photo of Elaine, Emily and me at Emily's high school graduation. Not even about us? Elaine sees what she expects to see, I explained, a trace of contempt coloring my voice. She expects a faithful husband who's occasionally distant because of work stress. So that's what she sees. And the money? Nearly $60,000 from your joint savings? She didn't notice that. I smiled, remembering how easy it had been. 2 years ago, I convinced her to let me handle all the finances so she could focus on her mother's care. She hasn't looked at a bank statement since. She just assumes everything's taken care of. Christine shook her head, a mixture of admiration and judgment in her expression. That level of trust is almost pathetic. Her words triggered an unexpected flash of defensiveness. Elaine wasn't pathetic, she was decent, a quality that had once attracted me before it began to feel like an indictment of my own nature. It's made things easier, I said simply. But let's not talk about Elaine. We should discuss our flight details for next week. I'm thinking we should take separate flights, meet in Miami, then continue together. Christine frowned, disappointment evident in her expression. You promised we'd leave together. A clean break. It's safer this way. Less suspicious. You're still worried about her coming after you? After we're gone? I thought about Elaine again, her quiet competence, her persistence. The way she'd nursed that damn cherry tree for years until it finally bloomed. It's just a precaution. Once we're in Grand Cayman and the money's secured, none of it will matter. Christine seemed unconvinced but didn't push further. Instead, she moved closer, her fingers working at my shirt buttons. We have the house to ourselves. Shouldn't we make the most of it? The recklessness of it, making love in the bed I shared with Elaine, held a perverse appeal, a final act of rebellion against the life that had constrained me for so long. But caution prevailed. "Not here," I said, catching her wrists gently. "Too many complications if we're interrupted. Let's go back to your place." Disappointment flashed across her face, quickly replaced by understanding. "You're right. We've come too far to take unnecessary risks now." As we prepared to leave, my phone chimed with a text message from Elaine. "Had emergency with Mom. At Green Meadows now. We'll be home in an hour." Relief flooded through me. Just as I'd predicted, she was at her mother's facility, following the patterns that had made her so easy to manipulate for years. "We need to go," I told Christine, showing her the message. "She'll be home soon." Christine gathered her purse but paused at the bedroom door. "What if she already knows, Marcus? What if she's not as clueless as you think?" The question sent an unexpected chill through me. "She doesn't," I said firmly. "Trust me, I know my wife." But as we left the house, Christine's words lingered uncomfortably. I'd built my entire plan around Elaine's predictability, her trust, her fundamental belief in our marriage despite its flaws. If I'd miscalculated there, what else might I have gotten wrong? I pushed the thought aside. 7 more days and none of it would matter. 7 days until freedom. After dropping Christine at her car, parked prudently around the corner, I returned to the house to prepare for Elaine's arrival. I needed to maintain the facade for just a little longer. I started her favorite pasta sauce, the one with extra basil and red pepper flakes that I made when I needed her cooperative and unquestioning. The familiar routine of chopping garlic and onions steadied my nerves. I'd played this role for years. I could manage it for 7 more days. When I heard her key in the door an hour later, I was ready. Concerned husband, slightly distracted by work problems but fundamentally reliable. The final performance in a long-running show. "There you are," I called out, looking up with a carefully calibrated smile. "How's your mom?" "The same," she answered vaguely, setting down her purse. "One of her bad days." I nodded sympathetically, the perfect picture of a concerned son-in-law. "I made your favorite. Thought you could use some comfort food after the day you've had." Something flickered in her eyes. So brief I almost missed it. Not gratitude, not appreciation. Something sharper, more assessing. "That's thoughtful," she said, washing her hands at the sink, her back to me. "How was your day?" "Frustrating," I sighed, injecting just the right amount of weariness into my voice. "The bank is being ridiculous about the house sale. Some issue with the wire instructions. Nothing serious, but a headache." She dried her hands slowly, methodically, a surgeon's precision in the mundane task. When she turned around, her face was composed, unreadable. "Oh? What kind of issue?" "Just bureaucracy. You know how banks are." I waved a wooden spoon dismissively, forcing casual confidence into my gesture. "I've sorted it out. The money should transfer tomorrow, then we can start looking for a rental. I'm thinking something closer to your mom's facility might be good. Make things easier for you." The lie rolled out smoothly, wrapped in just enough consideration to deflect suspicion. 18 years of practice had made me an expert at telling Elaine exactly what she needed to hear. "That makes sense," she agreed, reaching for plates to set the table. But something in her movements seemed too deliberate, too controlled. "What kind of budget are we looking at for the rental?" The question was perfectly reasonable, exactly what the Elaine I knew would ask. So why did it send a prickle of unease down my spine? "I'm thinking around $3,000 a month," I said, stirring the sauce with unnecessary vigor. "Should get us something decent without overcommitting." Elaine nodded, arranging silverware with precise movements. "And the rest of the money from the house? Will we invest it?" Another reasonable question, yet it felt like the temperature in the kitchen had dropped several degrees. I kept my voice casual. "I thought we'd put most of it away for retirement. Maybe take a small portion for a vacation. We haven't had one in years." That sounds nice, she said, and smiled a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Where were you thinking? Somewhere warm, maybe? My spoon stilled momentarily over the sauce. The question hung in the air between us, innocuous on the surface yet somehow charged with meaning. Did she know something? Had she seen something in the house, on my computer, in my expression? No, I reassured myself. I was being paranoid. Elaine was exactly who she had always been, trusting, practical, focused on our shared future. A future she didn't realize was evaporating with every passing hour. I was thinking maybe Florida, I lied smoothly. Nothing too exotic. Just somewhere to relax. She held my gaze for a moment too long before turning away to pour water into glasses. Florida sounds perfect. As we sat down to dinner, a parody of domestic harmony, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The carefully constructed scenario I'd been orchestrating for months suddenly felt precarious, as if the stage beneath my feet had developed an almost imperceptible tilt. I raised my glass in a casual toast. To new beginnings. Elaine's glass met mine with a soft clink, her eyes never leaving my face. Yes, she agreed quietly. To getting exactly what we deserve. Part 2. The morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains Elaine had insisted on despite their ridiculous price tag, casting strange shadows on the wall as I dressed for what would be one of my final days in this life. Beside me, Elaine slept, or pretended to sleep, I couldn't be certain anymore. Something about last night's conversation had left me unsettled, a persistent discomfort like a pebble in a shoe that couldn't be dislodged. I selected my clothes carefully, the charcoal gray suit that projected authority, a crisp white shirt, the blue tie that Christine had given me for my birthday. Every element designed to present an image of success and confidence. Image had always mattered in my profession, but today it felt crucial. Armor against the lingering doubt that had crept in overnight. Early meeting? Elaine's voice, still husky with sleep, startled me. I turned to find her watching me, propped up on one elbow, her face unreadable in the half-light. Yes, bank appointment about the house sale. Nothing to worry about. She nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. Good luck, she said simply. The words seemed innocent enough, yet something in her tone, a certain weight perhaps, sent a ripple of unease down my spine. I forced a smile. Should be straightforward. Just paperwork. In the kitchen, I gulped down coffee while checking my phone. A text from Christine waited. Everything ready for today? On track, I replied, though the confident words belied the subtle anxiety that had begun to gnaw at me. Meeting with the bank this morning. The drive to First Colonial Bank took me past familiar landmarks that I viewed with increasing detachment. The park where Emily had learned to ride a bike. The coffee shop where Elaine and I used to meet for lunch in the early years of our marriage. The high school with its proud banner congratulating last year's graduating class. All part of a life that would soon exist only in memory, artifacts of Marcus Reynolds, family man. Thomas Kirkland was younger than I'd expected. Early 30s with meticulously groomed hair and a precision to his appearance that suggested attention to detail. Not ideal for my purposes. I'd hoped for someone older, someone more easily charmed or intimidated. Mr. Reynolds, he greeted me, extending his hand. Thank you for coming in. Please, follow me. He led me not to one of the open desks but to a small conference room. Another bad sign. This suggested a longer conversation than I'd anticipated. I understand you're in a hurry to complete this transaction, he began once we were seated, his tone professionally neutral. But I hope you can appreciate that a wire transfer of this size, particularly to an offshore account, requires certain verification. I leaned forward, adopting the confident posture that had served me well in countless sales meetings. Of course, I have all the necessary documentation right here. I slid across the folder I'd prepared: transfer instructions, closing documents, identification. all meticulously organized, above suspicion. Kirkland reviewed the papers with irritating thoroughness, his expression giving nothing away. Everything appears to be in order, he said finally. However, our policy for transfers of this magnitude requires joint authorization when the source funds involve jointly owned property. A cold weight settled in my stomach. My wife has authorized me to handle all financial matters. I have power of attorney. I withdrew the document from my portfolio and placed it before him, fighting to keep my hands steady. He examined it carefully. This is a general power of attorney which does indeed give you authority to act on your wife's behalf. However, he looked up at me. Our bank has additional verification requirements for international transfers over $500,000 regardless of legal authority. What exactly are you saying? I kept my voice level despite the panic beginning to build behind my ribs. I'm saying we would need your wife to come in and verify the transfer instructions in person. Or alternatively, we could process the transfer to a domestic account in both your names first. Neither option was acceptable. Elaine couldn't verify what she didn't know about, and a domestic account would leave a trail I couldn't afford. I needed that money to disappear cleanly, immediately. That won't work with our timeline, I said, injecting just the right note of frustrated businessman into my voice. The closing is next week, and we have commitments based on those funds being available. Surely there's another way to satisfy your requirements. Kirkland's expression remained impassive. There's one alternative. We could process the transfer if we receive written confirmation from your wife via her verified email address, along with a video verification call. The wall seemed to close in slightly as I calculated my options. I could forge an email easily enough. I'd had access to Elaine's accounts for years. But a video call would be impossible. Unless my wife is at work today. She's a surgical nurse at Mercy General. Getting her on a video call would be difficult. I paused, considering. What if I bring her in tomorrow morning? Would that work with your processing timeline? Kirkland nodded slowly. If she can come in by noon tomorrow, we should still be able to process the transfer in time for your closing. I'll block time on my calendar. Relief washed through me, though I kept it from showing on my face. This was a complication, but not an insurmountable one. I had options. Christine had theatrical training and a passing resemblance to Elaine from certain angles. With the right clothing, hairstyling, and Elaine's ID, which I could easily access. No, too risky. Bank cameras were everywhere, and identity fraud would escalate this from a marital dispute to a criminal matter. I needed a different approach. Tomorrow morning it is, I agreed, standing and extending my hand. Thank you for your flexibility, Mr. Kirkland. As I left the bank, my phone rang, Emily's face lighting up the screen. My daughter. The one pure thing in the tangled web I'd created. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, suddenly unsure if I could maintain the facade of normal fatherhood. But habit won out. Hey, sweetheart, I answered, forcing warmth into my voice. How's campus life? Dad. Perfect timing. I was just about to email you the dates for winter break. The dorms close December 15th, but I was thinking of coming home a few days earlier if that works. Coming home? To a home that wouldn't exist. To parents who wouldn't be living together. The reality of what I was about to do to my daughter hit me with unexpected force, momentarily stealing my breath. That should be fine, I managed, pulling into a gas station parking lot as my concentration wavered. We'll work it out. Are you okay? You sound weird. Emily had always been perceptive, too smart for her own good sometimes. Just wrapped up a tense meeting, I deflected. Nothing serious? How's the engineering project going? She launched into a detailed explanation that I struggled to follow, my mind racing with new complications. Emily coming home in December. The home sale closing next week. My planned departure on November 1st. The pieces that had fit so neatly in my timeline were suddenly colliding. Dad? Are you still there? Sorry, honey. Bad connection. Another lie, another small betrayal. Listen, I need to go. I'll call you tonight, okay? After hanging up, I sat motionless in my car, the carefully constructed plan that had seemed so solid 24 hours ago now showing dangerous cracks. I needed to think, to recalibrate. I called Christine. "The bank wants Elaine to verify the transfer in person," I said without preamble. A sharp intake of breath. "That's a problem. I told them I'd bring her in tomorrow morning. I need a new plan." Christine's voice hardened. "We have nearly 800,000 reasons to find a solution, Marcus. Figure it out." The edge in her tone surprised me. In the 18 months of our relationship, I'd seen glimpses of Christine's ruthless practicality, but never directed at me with such force. It was both unsettling and oddly arousing. A reminder of why I'd been drawn to her in the first place. "I'm working on it," I assured her. "Meanwhile, we need to accelerate our timeline. Emily called about coming home for winter break. We need to be long gone by then, with no trace." "That was always the plan," Christine reminded me, impatience evident. "November 1st departure. No looking back. Right?" I agreed, pushing aside the strange heaviness that had settled in my chest at the thought of Emily returning to an empty house, a vanished father. No looking back. I drove home slowly, mind working through scenarios. I could try to convince Elaine to come to the bank, tell her it was a formality for the closing. But after last night's strange tension, I wasn't confident in my ability to predict her reactions anymore. Something had shifted between us, something I couldn't quite identify, but that felt dangerous to my carefully laid plans. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed something odd. Elaine's car was gone. She should have been at work hours ago, her car in the hospital parking garage. Why had she come back home and left again? Inside, the house felt different somehow. I couldn't immediately identify what had changed, but something was off, an absence where there should have been presence, or perhaps the reverse. I moved through the rooms cautiously, senses heightened. In our bedroom, I checked Elaine's jewelry box. The pearl earrings from her grandmother were missing, as was the sapphire pendant I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. The charm bracelet with Emily's milestones was gone too. Cold dread settled in my stomach as I moved to her closet. Several empty hangers hung where her favorite outfits should have been. Not enough to be immediately obvious, but enough to suggest careful selection and removal. She knew. Somehow Elaine knew. I rushed to my office, heart pounding. My laptop bag sat in the corner, seemingly undisturbed. I unzipped it with trembling hands. The computer was there, but something about its position felt wrong. I opened it, typed in my password, Cayman 2023, and navigated directly to my plan folder. Everything was there, but the timestamps on several documents showed they had been opened yesterday afternoon, when I was at the coffee shop meeting Christine. Elaine had seen everything, the real estate listings in Grand Cayman, the lease agreement, the offshore account details. Worst of all, she'd seen my timeline with its methodical outline of betrayal. Panic rose in my throat, threatening to choke me. I grabbed my phone and called Elaine. Straight to voicemail. I tried the hospital next. Mercy General Surgery. How may I direct your call? This is Marcus Reynolds. I need to speak with my wife, Elaine Reynolds. It's an emergency. A pause. I'm sorry, Mr. Reynolds, but Elaine called in sick today. She's not on the schedule. Called in sick. Elaine, who hadn't missed a day of work in 3 years. I hung up without responding and immediately dialed Green Meadows Assisted Living, my hands shaking so badly I miscalled twice. Green Meadows, how may I help you? This is Marcus Reynolds, Judith Miller's son-in-law. I need to check if my wife is there visiting her mother. Let me see. No, Mrs. Reynolds hasn't been in today. Would you like me to have her call you when she comes in? I muttered something and ended the call, my mind racing. Elaine wasn't at work. She wasn't at her mother's.